So I want to do two different videos on the money market. The first is just kind of what the money market shows and things that affect both money supply and demand for money. The next video, I'm going to get into things, really the shifting of the money supply and how that impacts the economy as a whole. But the money market shows the supply and demand for money, and it sets the interest rates. I've said this for the last 2 days, time and time again. We need to stop thinking about money as anything other than a product. So it's supply and demand. We need to go back to our micro training and understand that when supply shifts, quantity demanded changes, not demand. When demand shifts, there'll be a movement along the supply curve. So if supply increases, demand doesn't change and vice versa. Here are the three things that affect the money supply. The money supply is controlled by the Fed. And realistically, the interest rate doesn't affect the money supply. It's the opposite. The money supply affects the interest rate. And the Fed controls the interest rate or sets the interest rate. And the interest rate here, you don't need to know this, but it's the federal funds rate, which affects all interest rates. And the Fed controls the money supply through these three things. The first is open market operations, buying and selling bonds. When you buy something, you use money. In this case, the Fed takes money and puts it into the economy. When you sell bonds, you get money for giving away something. So in this case, selling bonds, the Fed would give bonds and get money. Selling bonds moves money supply left. Buying bonds moves money supply right. Reserve requirement. The Fed increases, decreases the reserve requirement, how much money banks must keep on hand. This will affect the money multiplier. You increase the reserve requirement, decrease money supply. Decrease reserve requirement, increase money supply. And the discount rate. This is the rate at which Fed will loan banks on short-term overnight loans, the rate they lend it. The higher the discount rate, the more likely banks will keep excess reserves, which would decrease the money multiplier. You raise discount rate, money supply left. You lower it, money supply right. Now the demand for money, which is not affected by the Fed, this is kind of the people in the economy, their desire to keep money on hand. That is affected by two things that the AP will ask you about. The first is price level. If goods and services are more expensive, if price level goes up, if there's inflation, people need to keep more money with them because they're buying the same goods and services, but now they're more expensive. So I'll go to the bank more often to get money out of my ATM so that I can use it at the store. The other will be the taste for liquidity. You might be asked this, that people start going towards mobile apps to credit cards to Apple Pay. Therefore, they don't need as much money out of the bank or don't desire. Those two things would affect demand for money. But for the second one, the AP will make it more explicit. The first one, if price levels go up, if it says there's inflation, people demand more money. Price levels go down, people demand less money.